and so on. In order to shut down Michael's castle guard, they needed to convince the subjects that Rudra was the source of all evil. Pretend he was dead, and the number of people who believe in Rudra would be reduced. Then he introduced Masayuki as the new emperor, but many people were confused as to how that could be possible without any blood relation. To convince them, Velgrynd steps forward. Calm yourselves, fools. My name is Velgrynd, the Scorched Dragon. The subjects were upset when they were told the same name as the Empire's guardian dragon. No way was what was going through everyone's minds. In accordance with the Imperial Code of Ethics, I hereby appoint chosen hero Masayuki as the new emperor. With that declaration, Velgrynd visibly unleashed her overwhelming supremacy. A divine crimson, cardinal aura is visible to all. In addition, she held out her hand in a certain direction and called out to the subjects. Behold, a salute to the new emperor. As she finished, the flaming god mountain erupted into flames. This massive eruption was clearly visible from the imperial capital. What would be too horrific to even call a cannonball was no less than a joke to Velgrynd. But the astonishment of the subjects who saw it was beyond words. No one doubted it. One might say it was a premeditated situation and triggered to erupt with magic or bombs, but the volcano was God's mountain. One had no idea what kind of anger they might incur if they did so without asking permission from the mountain's resident Scorched Dragon. No one in the imperial city would dare to act so recklessly. That's not all. Several volcanic bombs had landed on the imperial city, but they were all flung off by an invisible barrier. That was truly the true nature of the guardian dragon. A god. It's real. The real dragon god. The guardian dragon of the empire has appeared in front of us. They were very excited. Over time, they also began to understand the gravity of the situation. Velgrynd confirmed it. The subjects finally understand that chosen hero Masayuki has truly become an emperor. At the same time, Masayuki was well known in the Eastern Empire, though not as well known in the Western nations. Oh my gosh, really? Don't tell me it's Shining Masayuki. Isn't he the greatest chosen hero in the world? Of course, even Demon Lord Rimuru can't resist. The impression that was heard somewhere flies around, as if members of a theater company were spreading it. That is the quality of Masayuki. He is famous everywhere. And this time, Masayuki's power has been enhanced. The effect was far-reaching and had a huge impact on those who knew him. As a result, there was the usual cheers. Ma-sa-yu-ki. Ma-sa-yu-ki. The cheers were so harmonious that it seemed as if the voices of the subjects were united. Velgrynd and others said, fools. It's so impolite to call the emperor by his name, they thought, but Masayuki himself was not angry, so he acquiesced. It was Tensura who was the most upset. The empire's subjects misunderstood that Demon Lord Rimuru couldn't resist Masayuki, and she had the feeling that she would boil over if this continued, but this was a plan drawn by Tensura herself. There was no one to complain about, so she had to put up with it. And so, it was very easy for Masayuki to be accepted by his subjects in the empire. And on that day, he was proclaimed to the nations of the world as Emperor of the Eastern Empire, the Nazca-Namria-Mulmiria United Eastern Empire. The subjects of the imperial city have been revitalized by the newfound hope. The grief of those who have lost their loved ones would not heal quickly, but they have begun to move forward. Their daily lives are returning to normal. Calgurio knew it was all the more gratifying. However, the days of Trures were far from over. A troublesome opponent, the nobility, was on the move now that the new emperor had been officially appointed. With minutes in charge, he'd like to leave the highborn to their own devices, but it was for Calgurio's convenience, and the nobles don't care who is in charge of the new emperor. That's why the requests for visits are always coming in. When he looked at Tensura for help, she said without a care in the world, "These are the noblemen of this country, but I'm sure most of them won't be a problem." Calgurio had no idea what that meant, but he understood that Tensura was behind it. Since Minas was working on his job, Calgurio decided to focus on what he could do. Then, within days, the requests for visits began to dwindle. Calgurio wondered if she had threatened them, but he couldn't say it out loud. The lady sipping her tea elegantly in front of him was the white Primordial Blanc, long feared by the Empire. It's hard to believe even if told, but it's an undeniable fact. That's why it was no surprise that she was using some terrifying method. "Oh, excuse me. Why do you look at me with such terror? I've never done anything wrong." That's what all bad people think. But saying it was different. It was impossible for Calgurio, who felt so cramped in his own office, to tell the queen like Tensura what he really thought of her. It's unavoidable. "No, ha, I'm not doubting you. I'm grateful every day that you've been such a great help. And so, I'm just wondering how you manage to keep the nobleman quiet. I wish you wouldn't have to worry about that and just go about your business." Tensura sipped her tea. Then she let out one elegant sigh. "Well, alright. I'll feel awkward taking credit for it, so I'll let you know. As I told you before, the nobles weren't much of a problem. So, why is that? First of all, the nobles of this empire were divided into 3 major factions. Of course, you knew that, didn't you? Yes. The warlord aristocracy, led by the Marquis family, Minas family, was the central figure, the Emperor faction. The rest are the local nobility. The military, a powerful organization, was the cornerstone of the empire. There were many nobles who joined its steadfast authority, and the warlord nobles boasted great power. The Marquis, the second highest ranking nobleman, was the head of this faction, which meant that few high-ranking nobles participated in it. In contrast, the aristocracy was dominated by those with ties to the emperor. This faction symbolizes the authority of the aristocracy in that they must be at least an earl or higher to have a say in the matter. The provincial aristocracy is the least coherent faction. They are made up of nobles who individually have no voice in the opinions that suit them. It could be said that they are only one faction because their interests are aligned. At Calgurio's explanation, Tensura nodded lightly. That's right. The warlord aristocracy first, but this was like the Minutes were in control of it, wasn't it? No, Minutes and his younger brother don't get along. No. That thing was, just sulking. What? You were almost overwhelmed by the sense of responsibility when your respected brother gave the Marquis house. So, by rebelling and showing it, he was telling himself that he could protect his physical appearance, while still being able to convince himself. Well, that sounds like a weak human story, and Tensura replied with a laugh. Is that true? I mean, how did you find out that it was? See, Cret. You've heard the saying. The less you know, the happier you are, haven't you? That fact was investigated by Moss overnight. Moss is overworked by Tensura and has no time to rest. Perhaps the worst victim in Tempest is Moss, the demon noble known as the King of Ashes. However, he can't complain about that and is quietly working his way through the dark environment. Moss sneaked into the Marquis's house and read the diary hidden in the master's office. He reported this secret to Tensura. Even with the strict security of the Marquis's house, there was no way to pull one over Moss. He also found out other information that would improve relations, and casually told Minutes about it. It would normally be crime, but for those who were unaware that they had done something wrong, this was nothing bad. Hahaha, that's right. Of course, I believe in Tensura Dono. It's a wild thing to ask any more questions. Calgurio ran away. It was a very wise decision. Despite the odds, the relationship between Minutes and his brother were on the mend. Then, if it was all good, he decided to just let the results speak for themselves. I'm convinced about the warlord nobility, but how are the other factions doing? Well, the provincial aristocrats have expressed their willingness to return. What? When did it happen? They were the first to fall. Because the most important thing to those guys was that the people of the territory didn't go hungry. The stabilization of the countryside had been accomplished, so the rest of them were still worried about future politics. By the way, do you know what the local nobleman's financial resources are? It's mainly from the crops that are harvested in each fiefdom. They pay taxes after they get enough to meet their needs. The surplus is then sold to their merchants. Those sales are what I understand to be the source of income for the local lords. Well, you're generally right, but you're partly wrong. Calgurio felt strange. How was he, at the pinnacle of the Imperial Army, being lectured on economics by the demon that had once afflicted the Empire? He couldn't figure it out, and was perplexed. How can a demon know so much about human economic activities? I'm from a lowly provincial aristocracy, so I knew, but I don't think that even your average high-ranking soldier knows that. Moreover, his answer is not a perfect score. There are other local crafts and specialties that can be done by hand, but he doesn't think that's the right answer. Calgurio doesn't think she's the kind of person to make such a fuss, and praises Tensura. What is the right answer, then? It's black market trade. What? Calgurio answers unintentionally. There is no such thing as a black market in this empire. Just believing that, he was astonished by the imposing answer. Oh, is it strange? Of course it is. The empire, under the authority of His Majesty, stands for equality for all. Noblemen, of course, are exempt, but even commoners have a chance of promotion in the military. I know. I'm not talking about the surface of it, but the practical side of it. The black market is essential. Do you know why? Even if you say it's mandatory, he knows that Tensura is serious. But Calgurio couldn't help but be disbelieving. If the traitorousness of the Emperor's black market is so widespread, the Imperial intelligence could not have been ignorant of it. It would not have gone unnoticed by the late Lieutenant Kondu, for that matter. He was even called an intelligence monster, a man who was feared. And he couldn't help but feel that the injustice therein had been left unchecked. Unbelievable. Kondu Dono missed the wrongdoing. He muttered to himself, and Tensura looked at Calgurio in dismay. You're so stiff. You missed it because it wasn't a bad thing. Well, what's that supposed to mean? It sounds nice to be a nobleman's maid, but power relationship is determined by the rank of the employer. Do you think a merchant of a lower class can compete with a merchant of a higher class? The answer is, it's impossible. When you're powerful, you have to do as you're told. That's where the black market comes in. The reason Echidna and its successor, Cerberus the Imperial, underworld societies, existed, is because there was a need for them. It was an eye-opener for Calgurio. A merchant must be free, Tensura says. A fixed salary is not enough to really pursue profit. To bind them by force would only provoke a rebellion, and that would get the people into trouble before that. It is because he understood that conduit did not seriously interfere in the underworld. So was human trafficking, which is officially banned.